Yeah. So I remember marching into my pastor's office and saying, nobody talks about sex besides don't do it. And we need to start talking about it because it's so powerful and it can be so connecting. It can create so much intimacy in marriage. And we need to start talking about all the good things about sex in marriage. And he patiently met with me a few times until I realized he wasn't supposed to do something. I was supposed to do something.
Everyone, welcome to this episode of Get Your Marriage On. I'm delighted to have my guest today, Ruth Buezis. She's the author of a book called Awaken Love. She also puts on her classes called the Awaken Love classes for men, women, and couples. I've read her book and I've participated in some of her online classes before the video, and she has a lot of really good things to say. Welcome today.
This is going to be fun, Daniel. I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm just really curious to know, did you always, like when you were a little girl, knew when you're an adult, you wanted to help people improve their sex lives? Was that something you've always wanted to do, or
that was the last thing on my mind? I'm an engineer. My dad's an engineer. My brother's an engineer. I am a rational thinker and never ever thought that I would be teaching classes about sex or writing books about sex.
Wow. So what happened?
About 10 years ago, I was taking a class on Song of Songs, a book in the Bible that few of us study and few of us read and few pastors preach on. And that book, it's funny, it speaks to your heart rather than your mind. And it gave me a real sense of how much intimacy God wanted me to have with him, but also how much intimacy God wanted me to have with my husband. And that was the beginning of us really beginning to work on our sex life. And it's not that we had a bad sex life. Our sex life was fine. And we figured out what worked. We kind of stuck with it. But honestly, it had gotten to the place where we had sex when my hormones surged, those twice a month spikes that women can get in their cycles. And other than that, I was the gatekeeper because even though I thought it was something that was physical for my husband because he wanted it, I actually was the one that was treated as just a way to, take care of physical urges when I wanted it. And so since that time, I started reading a lot of things, listening to a lot of things. There's so many resources online now to learn about sex, reading good Christian books. And it changed my life when I changed my sex life. It changed our marriage. And it is so much more intimate than it ever was before.
I like that you talk about intimacy and how you felt like the way God wants to be intimate with you as a pattern for being intimate with your husband. Can we define intimacy? Because often we use the word intimacy as a euphemism for sex, and I don't think that's what you mean in this context.
Yeah, no, I think there's physical intimacy, but there's emotional intimacy, there's spiritual intimacy, and I think of intimacy as fully knowing my husband and letting him fully know me. And that's in every sense of the word, whether it's sharing my body with him during sex, whether it's sharing my insecurities, baggage that I've had in the past. It's being able to talk to my husband about anything and not having secrets anymore and things that hold me in shame that I'm afraid to share with him. And the same for him, to be in a safe place for him to share with me.
Does it take courage to share and open up like that?
Yeah, it takes courage. That's probably one of the scariest things I did was to start opening up with my husband about some of the things I'd never talked to anybody about before. And
without getting too personal or anything, or can you just highlight, like, what are some examples of things that a lot of people hold back sharing that you held back sharing that
Sure.
were barriers to you?
So for me, a child's play situation that happened when I was young. And for some people, those child's play situations might not be any big deal, but for me, it was the dirty secret that I knew about myself and nobody else in the world knew. And I never ever told a living soul. And it's what I think kind of caused me to hide a little bit, like, what if people knew this about me? And so that was really the first big thing that I shared with my husband in opening up. And there was so much freedom that just came out of that, and having him just hold me and love me as I talked about what was holding shame over me.
Great. Any other things from your upbringing that made you anxious about sex going into marriage?
I just think so many of us haven't really had good, healthy, open conversations with their parents about sex. And the silence surrounding sex communicates a lot of things about sex. It could communicate that it's shameful, that it's not okay, that, well, you can do it, but don't have too much fun doing it. Or maybe the silence communicates that, you know what, this should just come naturally. You shouldn't have to talk to anybody about this. And then if it doesn't come naturally, well, there must be something wrong with you, because nobody's talking about this. So why should you need any help with this topic? And so the silence, I think that impacts us.
Besides silence, what about mixed messages from the media? How does that impact people's ability to really get intimate in their marriage relationships?
I think there are a lot of messages about sex that would tell us that sex is all for men. And those messages come from the church. As far as Christian books that always have to have a chapter to let wives know how important sex is to their husband, never a chapter to the husband saying, like, your wife might not realize this, but this is important for her too, and it's going to take some work and tender, loving care to figure her out. But also even just, sitcoms where the husband's chasing the wife around and the wife is like, you idiot, I don't want sex. And so this message that sex is just for men and it's just for husbands makes it feel like it puts sex on the bottom of a wife's to-do list of just one more obligation. And it begins to feel like a duty rather than something that's going to energize or restore her or comfort her or refresh her. And so I think that has a huge impact on women. But, there are lies from men too, right? As far as the lie that, all men should know what to do to satisfy a woman. And he should just naturally know those things. You shouldn't have to talk about it. Or that, the way that sex is pictured in media as far as what it looks like and what will satisfy a woman. And women are very different from men, and how the world would a man know how to satisfy a woman unless he's asked her and he understands her body, because our bodies are very different than a man's body.
That again. So you go through this transformation yourself. You realize, holy cow, sex is just as much for me as it is for my husband. And then you had the courage to talk to your pastor if you could put on a class. Tell us about that and how it's involved from there.
Yeah. So I remember marching into my pastor's office and saying, nobody talks about sex besides don't do it. And we need to start talking about it because it's so powerful and it can be so connecting. It can create so much intimacy in marriage. And we need to start talking about all the good things about sex in marriage. And he patiently met with me a few times until I realized he wasn't supposed to do something. I was supposed to do something. And so my very first class, I invited about 8 friends out on my porch. And I wrote a curriculum based on my journey. And I have no idea what I said. I know I was nervous as heck. But by week 3, they were waiting. As they left in the evening, they were sharing with me, you can't imagine how this has changed my marriage. And it's grown from that, just word of mouth and friends sharing with friends. And it to the point where I have personally taught over 800 women, I think, in the last 8 years. And then another 1,200 or something online. And then my husband and I teamed up to teach men's classes because I thought you know what? Like, this is just one half of the equation. If we only have classes for women, it's basically telling husbands, you know what? Your wife is the one with the problem. If she just figures it out, you'll be good. And in all honesty, husbands have just as much to learn as wives. It's a team sport. It's not an individual sport. And I thought, where are husbands going to get good information about sex? Because it's not important. That's the opposite of what works for a woman. And so I wanted to create a class that would help husbands to love their wives in every aspect, as far as understanding some of the challenges, some of the lies that she believes, the battles, but also understanding how her body works. And so that's been really fun, teaching the men's classes too.
Can you tell me any stories of, let's say, women that come through your classes? What are some of the things that you teach them? And like, what were some of the big ahas for them?
I remember one fairly recently. We were going through baggage, and one of the women said, you know, it feels like I've been serving my husband chocolate cake for the last 30 years, and I've never had a slice. And she was just at that point of realizing, like, I want to enjoy this too. And we need to work on this. I need to figure out what works for my body. I need to help my husband understand, but I don't want to just keep serving chocolate cake to my husband. I want this to be mutual. And I thought that was such a profound way for her to put that. I've never had a slice of chocolate cake. I just keep serving it. So that one, I remember one of the husbands taking the class, and he said, well, you know, when I first got married, he said, I want to be really good at this sex thing. So he said, I started keeping a journal. And every time we'd have sex, I write down exactly what worked and what didn't work and what we did. And he said, my wife found my journal, and she was really upset. And she says, you will never figure me out. And I thought,
He sounds like an engineer.
yeah, I'm like, that's right on, because it's, for a woman, it's not about a husband figuring it out or finding the exact path. It's about a journey of discovery together and meeting each other in those moments and seeing what can we create together. And I love that, because I think that for whatever reason, women maybe have a little better handle on how do you create a sex life where you're getting to know each other and not just trying to get to the destination, which is really what God intended. Because if you're going to create intimacy, sex has to be about this journey of getting to know each other, not just getting to the destination. That's what it's about. And a lot of us don't have sex that way.
No, a lot of us, or at least, I guess there's different phases or different levels, right? If you look at it that way. On a lower level, it's, you know, you got your bodies together and you both experience pleasure. But at a much deeper, more meaningful level, there's so much richness. It's like wholehearted loving and cherishing. And it's a new way of communicating at a really deep and core level of love and connection and acceptance and cherishing. There's so much richness to it when it's full-hearted loving, not just the physical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that one of the concepts that we teach in class is, it's probably one of the more transformational concepts, is that God created sex in order to comfort each other. And it's not that's not an easy place for wives to go, especially partially because sex, for so many of us, sex it's been pounded into us that it's this duty. And so it's this thing that we have to do and fulfill. It's not something that fills us up. And I've had several different women share about experiences where sex was a comfort. And one of them, she was older and she'd been married a number of years, had a good marriage. And she said, I would never have ever thought of sex being a comfort. But after class, she said, I remember I had a terrible day at work. And I came home, and all I wanted to do was become with one with my husband. And she said, I would have never, ever considered that before. I would have pushed him away and just leave me alone, you know. And so, and to see those transformations where women move from this duty to really embracing this gift that God has given them as a way to restore them, that's an amazing thing to see.
What common myths we actually are taught? We're going to edit this out. Sorry, I don't want to go there. Okay, let me think this. And then, all right. I want to jump into what if I were to ask a question about 3 or so things you've learned from God's word about sex you want to share? Is that a good question?
We can do that. We can do whatever you want, Daniel.
Okay, I'm going to move there. So I'm going to intentionally be silent for a few seconds so that when I edit it, I can like visually see where the break is. And then I'm going to ask that question.
Okay.
Actually, I have a better question. We're going to go first. You've talked about teaching women that sex isn't just something for men, but it's something for herself also. You've also taught us about how sex can be a comfort. What else do you teach in your courses that what sex is or what really good sex is?
One of the things that I teach in class is that sex is supposed to help us understand intimacy with God. And that's this very weird foreign concept. It comes out of Ephesians 5:31 through 32, where Paul talks about becoming one with the church or becoming one in marriage. And then he says, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. And I think it's an important concept because I think there's so many lies about sex and even wrong messages even coming from the church. And I think that's such an important concept because it will help you understand what did God really intend for sex. For instance, this idea that women are supposed to just serve their husband with sex, and whether you're into it or not, like just like you need to take care of your husband. Well, I think about, does God want us to just show up at church and just be there to check it off of our list? Or does he want us to show up with our heart and give ourselves to him? Or even the idea that women a lot of times will think, well, I need to have myself all put together and like I need to feel good about things before I can have sex with my husband. Well, I think sometimes we feel the same way about God. Well, like if I'm not doing well, I can't meet with God and I got to get myself back together. Well, maybe the times we are most supposed to meet with God is when we're a mess and when we're broken. And maybe some of the times we're most supposed to come together with our husband is when we're a mess. And so I just think there are a lot of things that you can figure out what's true about sex if you compare it to your relationship with God. One of the other concepts that we talk about, of course, and it was a really common concept, is that God created sex to make us into one. And that's probably one of the most common concepts in the church about sex. I think we teach about it a lot in purity culture with singles, because we tell them, you know, if you have sex with somebody else, it's like you join yourself together with them. And then if you don't get married, you leave part of yourself behind because that sex has made you into one. I think the same thing is true in marriage. But the thing is, we read marriage books all the time that say, well, women need to feel loved in order to have sex. That might be our natural inclination, but is it possible that sometimes we need to just come together and be one and have God help us become one in order to work through our problems and to feel more connected? And that's not something that comes naturally to a woman. Our natural inclination is to want to feel emotionally connected to our husband. This is something that was a big aha moment for me, because I remember my husband initiating sex sometimes when we were not on the same page. In fact, we had been in a disagreement, and for whatever reason, we weren't going to work it out that night. And we go to bed, and all of a sudden he's reaching for me because he wants to have sex. And I'm just like incredulous, like, how can you even think about sex right now? But my husband is the nicest guy, kindest, most loving husband. Like, he would never try to hurt me or use me. And in those moments when he was reaching for sex with me, he was still that same person. He wasn't trying to hurt me or use me. And I think, is it possible that men actually get this concept of oneness through sex better than wives do? And then when my husband was in those moments where he didn't know what to say to make things better, what to do to make things better, he knew that if we could just have sex, God would help to make things better. He would help to unify us, and so we could work through our problems better after sex. That is a strange and foreign concept to most women, and yet there's a lot of power there. And I've had women that have tried it. They come to class, and I had one woman, she's like, my husband and I were in this disagreement about finances, and finally I'm just like, she said to him, we need to have sex. And he was like, huh? She's like, yep, we need to have sex. So she said they had sex, and then she said afterwards they were able to work out their problem so much easier. It's crazy to think about, and yet, like, is it possible there's power there that we are missing that could unify us as we navigate hard things in life? Now, I'm not talking about having sex with somebody that is not kind and loving. And I would never tell a wife, just have sex and it'll make things better. I'm telling a wife, you need to figure out who your husband is. And if he is a kind, loving husband that would never hurt you or use you, he is that same man when he is reaching for you. And you need to remember that. And you need to trust him in that moment. And you need to trust God to help you in that moment. And maybe even pray and say, God, you know what? I'm not there, but will you help me get on board? Will you help me to believe that you're going to make us into one and that this is going to be a good thing? Because it's not just about going along and going through the motions. It's about entering into oneness.
I think that's really profound. And I think a lot of those listening can probably relate to that situation where you realize your spouse really is a good, kind-hearted person, and they're not there to hurt you, but they're there to bless you with their touch and with their presence. Mm-hmm. There are also many marriages where there's sex is kind of a contention point. Maybe it's after years of a certain pattern, like she feeling like it's a duty, and that's kind of the stereotype. But of course, it can go either way. Yeah. Or where the husband takes on this idea, falsely probably, that he has it put together, but his wife is broken because she doesn't desire sex as much as he does. Mm-hmm. And that creates a lot of problems in that marriage because of his approach. Any suggestions for those listening, if you're caught in that kind of a situation, how you can break out of that awful cycle, whether you're the husband listening or the wife listening? Or sorry, I should clarify, higher desire spouse or the lower desire spouse listening at this point, so that you can break that cycle and kind of collaborate better and to build a sex life you can both enjoy and like.
I would tell you that there are reasons that people act the way they act. Okay. And there's an importance in, if your spouse is a lower drive spouse, there's a reason for it. That reason might be she doesn't enjoy sex. The reason may be sex feels like a duty. That might, like, there are all kinds of reasons. And so there's an importance in having, I think, in a compassion. It might be the husband that's a lower drive spouse, and he doesn't want to have sex because he dreads it, because he feels like he always ejaculates too soon, or he doesn't do things right. And so it can be either or, but there are reasons why. And I think that first you need to have a compassion for them.
Uh-huh.
because they're avoiding it because it scares the heck out of them. It makes them
Uh-huh.
uncomfortable. They have past messages that have told them whatever. And so you need to come from a place of compassion. And I think you need to start opening up discussion, maybe about past experiences. Maybe, as simple as, what did your parents tell you about sex?
Uh-huh.
What kind of messages does the church tell you about sex? Some of those lies, I just think there's an importance to trying to discover without any expectation about that person and have a curiosity about them and what's going on.
Uh-huh.
I think that's some beginning steps. I think as far as, a lot of couples aren't even comfortable talking about sex. It's either the taboo topic, or sometimes they've had enough bad conversations about sex that they just don't want to talk about it anymore.
Right.
And sometimes I think reading a book out loud to each other about the topic, if you can get them to do that with you, can really be helpful because it puts you on a neutral platform where there's no issue that you're trying to fix. You're not, it's just, you're reading about it, you're sharing is that how it is for you? You can have a curiosity.
You're not trying to fix the other person. You're there to just
trying to fix the
have
other
a conversation and get curious.
Yeah, you're trying to learn more about them. And you're not trying to fix. I think there are a lot of people that feel like the other person's trying to fix them, especially if they're the lower drive spouse.
And that's really not sexy, I gotta say.
No, it's not.
No. Oh, so besides your book, which is awesome, what other books do you recommend?
I think sheet music is pretty good. It's a fun book, and it's pretty good about keeping the attention. I think there are some parts in there that are. It's definitely written by a man, and
A little bit more explicit. I've read that book.
yep. So I think that's a good one. Man, I don't know, Daniel. I haven't been looking at my books lately.
I know you're well read because I read your blog and you quote from all these amazing books that you're reading all the time.
I'm a huge fan of David Schnark and Passionate Marriage, but that's not for the light reader. That's for the serious reader. I think it's deep. I think it's profound.
For those that aren't familiar with his work, can you give a brief overview of David Snarch, what he teaches? And
yeah. So he's all about, if you're going to become more intimate, you need to become more grounded yourself and more like, this is who I am, and I'm going to share myself with somebody else. And if you're completely dependent on somebody else for your self-worth, and every time they get upset, you're upset, and you're just tossed back and forth. And to me, even though it's not written as a Christian book, I think it totally translates to Christianity. As far as if we're going to share ourselves, well, we need to get our worth from God. Like, who did God create me to be? Let me be my authentic, honest self. And I'm going to share myself. I'm going to be honest about what I want. But if I don't get that, then I'm not going to be upset. I'm going to be okay with it. And I'm going to listen to the other person, and I'm not going to like overreact. And I just think like that's a huge concept that's very deep, but it translates to so much in sex. For instance, in the guys class, one night we talk about the lies that women believe and the ways that husbands can help their wife believe the truth. So one of the lies is that men just want to have sex. That's all they're interested in. So I shared with the guys, so like if you initiate sex and your wife says no, and you immediately roll over and pout or go down and watch TV, you basically just told your wife the only thing you're interested in is sex. Now, guys in class constantly tell me, Like, it's not that I just want sex, I just want to connect with my wife. So if you initiate sex with your wife and she says no, and you really just want to connect with her, what if you said, you know what, do you want to talk about something, or can I just hold you? Then you're telling her, it's not just sex, like, I just want to connect with you. And there are other ways to connect,
Oh
right?
yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's not easy to do. You got to hang on to yourself and not like take your wife's rejection personally and get so upset that you can't handle it. You got to be okay with who you are and who God says you are. And so that's where Schnarch comes in, right? Is grounding yourself in, who does God say I am? I'm going to be authentic to who I am. I'm going to be honest, but I'm also going to have compassion and be able to handle rejection.
He talks a lot about honesty and integrity also. Can you speak on that a little bit as a way of arriving at being more grounded in yourself and being more intimate in the relationship?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we beat around the bush. We don't really say what we want. We don't really say what we mean. We try to make other people happy and bend into who they want us to be, instead of, okay, this is the best Ruth that I can be, right? And when we do that, one of the things that it does, I think you lose any kind of passion in the marriage bed. Because if you bend to somebody else's desires and all you want to do is constantly try to make them happy, then how do you have any passion in the marriage? Because you don't really want anything, because if you want something, you might get rejected. And you're not gutsy enough to actually ask what you want for what you want. You just kind of hint at it or beat around the bush, instead of being bold and say, man, you're hot tonight. I would love to connect with you. You kind of just beat around the bush instead of being honest about what you want.
I like that. Like I can imagine if I were to have a friend that was just a yes man, no matter what I asked him for advice, he was always kind of telling me what I wanted to hear, because he was so overly concerned about what I think of him.
Right.
When it comes down to like a time when I really need to turn to someone for help, I'm not going to turn to that friend, because I don't feel like they're really being themselves, like they're like honest with me.
Right.
In that, not that they're trying to deceive me, but honest in that they're not showing up to be their best self to me. And likewise in our marriage, we need to kind of dig deep and be, like what you said, the best Ruth or the best Dan or the best version of you, and consistently and over time be that, to have that passion in your marriage bed.
Well, yeah, even in our marriage bed, I mean, you take it probably to maybe one of the worst places where we're not honest with each other, and a wife that for years is either pretending to enjoy sex or not asking for what she wants, and goes on for years and years, and nothing good comes out of that.
So let's swing to the opposite end of the spectrum. Let's say you're a really good couple, you're healthy, you connect well together regularly. What are Ruth's black belt advanced sex tips to take your marriage? You've been plateauing for a while, but things are okay. Now you're ready for the good stuff. What advice did you give that couple?
I think, okay, couple of things. One, I think there, especially for wives, I don't know if we always have permission to allow ourselves to think sexual thoughts as far as what would really be exciting and erotic for us. And I think there's an importance to that. I think women are enormously creative if we let ourselves be that. But I think that a lot of times we've just squashed it down, or we haven't carved out the time to do it. And so I think there's a real importance in allowing ourselves to think sexual thoughts and sharing those things with our spouse, in hopes that maybe those things can come to life, or maybe some of our sexual thoughts are ones where we can actually make them come to life. I think there's a real importance in men learning how to use their words to create excitement for women.
All right.
I think that men are so aroused by sight, and all a husband usually has to do is look at his wife's body and he's aroused. And that's not the same case with most women. I think for women, many times we are aroused by words, and you can see the evidence in we'll read a book that has sex scenes in it, and it'll make us warm up immediately. And so instead of us reading books about these sex scenes, how do we help our husbands begin to learn how to speak things that take us out of our mind and thinking about the kids and the laundry to living out this amazing experience together? And so how do we help our husbands learn how to do that? And our husband's not going to learn that on their own. We have to help them. And so that can be us speaking those kinds of things to our husbands, or doing a little bit of it and then asking him to fill in the story. But I think those things are a big deal. I think something that's really helpful to help your husband become a better lover is to use games. Because I think a lot of men carry a lot of responsibility for making sex good, and it can be a lot of pressure for a husband, and there's a huge there are many ways to fail if you're in a performance mode mindset. And when you use games, it kind of takes the pressure off, and it becomes this way of experimenting and learning new things where there's no failing, because it's not actually serious sex. It's just playing games around sex. And it can help give husbands ideas in ways that are non-threatening. They're not necessarily from you. They're from, a deck of cards or an app. Like, what's your new app, Daniel?
Intimately Us.
Intimately Us. Perfect example. Like, that's a great way. In fact, the guys in my class this last time, they were like, the games really help. They take the pressure off, and we can just have fun, relax, and we learn new things. We learn new things about our wife, and there's no failing in that. I mean,
and you laugh, and it's fun.
And it's fun. Yeah. So,
and sex really is a domain of play for adults. So,
yeah. I do think that for a wife, for both a wife and a husband, it's important to take pressure off during sex. You got to get this place where presence and connection becomes as important as mechanics, where you wake up and you see each other, and you see into each other, and you share yourself instead of performing. And so there's a real importance in figuring out how do we stop the performing, and how do we be together, showing up and not just having a plan, but not knowing where you're going, and just go exploring together.
So giving yourself permission to think more erotically, using your words, at least for the husbands, as a secret weapon, playing games and taking the pressure off. Those are 4 wonderful tips.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share today?
I know in this time of COVID that things are hard. And yet I think for couples, it's an opportunity to invest and to invest in a marriage, and to make your marriage intimate and close. And is it possible that sex is supposed to be one of the ways that we get through this pandemic, is through connecting with each other, and turning off the TV and running upstairs and escaping for a while, and not having to think about the pandemic. And so I just want to encourage you to not put off working on this part of your marriage. We can put it off until the kids are older, until the kids are in college, until, we can just keep putting it off, and there will always be some excuse. But working on your sex life is transformational, and it may be one of the best choices you make. And it won't just change your marriage, it'll change you, because somehow we believe this lie that sexual baggage and sexual sin is the unforgivable sin. And the truth is that God wants us to be whole, and he wants us to experience full healing and full freedom. And so diving into this area of your life and really seeking wholeness and healing is not just about your marriage, it's about you.
You're a great teacher, Ruth. Thank you very much. If people want to learn more about what you do, your classes, your book, your blog, where do they go to find you?
Yeah, so my website is awaken-love.net. You can learn about classes there. I have a blog there with quite a bit of content. The book is available on Amazon. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for being on today, and we'll catch you again.
Super fun. Thanks, Daniel.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Get Your Marriage On. And if you did, we would love it if you would take a few seconds to give us a rating on iTunes and to share the show with your friends. They'll thank you for life. Once you've done that, you can head over to getyourmarriageon.com for more resources about today's topic and to download our amazing marriage apps. Now go get your marriage on.